Have you ever poured out your heart to someone and walked away feeling empty, ashamed, or worse, regretting speaking up? You shared something precious, a dream, a pain, a faith, and the person on the other end smiled from the side, changed the subject, or worse, used it against you later. That has a name, and Jesus warned about it 2,000 years ago. Do not give what is holy to dogs, neither throw your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you in pieces. Matthew 7:6. Most people read this verse and think it's cruelty, that Jesus was calling people animals, that it's too harsh a teaching outside of the spirit of Christian love. But what if I told you that this is exactly the wrong reading? And that understanding this verse in the right way can change the way you relate to people, in family, at work, in friendship, in love. This warning is not about contempt. It is about discernment. It is about emotional self-preservation. It is about stopping wasting what is most sacred in you on those who do not have the capacity or desire to receive. And what modern psychology has discovered, with decades of research on relationships, emotional boundaries, and human behavior, is exactly what this verse said centuries ago. In this video, you'll understand what Jesus really meant. You'll find out who the dogs and pigs in your life are. And no, they're not your enemies. They're often the people closest to you. You'll learn why you keep giving your pearls to those who don't know their value. And most importantly, you'll understand how to stop doing it without guilt, without hurt, and without ceasing to love. Before you continue, if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, do so now. Click on the subscribe button and activate the bell. Every day there is content like this one, which no one tells you about at school, at church, or in therapy. Don't miss it. Stay until the end, because what comes next might be the warning you've needed to hear for a long time. What Jesus really meant by dogs and swine. When most people read Matthew 7:6, the first reaction is discomfort. Jesus, the same one who said to love your neighbor, to forgive 70 times 7, to turn the other cheek, is now comparing people to dogs and pigs. It sounds contradictory. It sounds harsh. It even seems cruel. But this discomfort exists because we read the verse with today's eyes, without understanding the cultural and spiritual context in which it was said. In Jesus' time, dogs were not pets. They had no name, no collar, no walk in the corner of the room. They were stray animals, ferocious, who lived in packs, fed on garbage and carrion. They were a symbol of impurity, and pigs for the Jews were ritually filthy animals, forbidden, untouchable, associated with everything that was contrary to sacred life. So when Jesus uses these two images, he is not being cruel. He is being surgical. He is saying there are contexts, situations, and people who are not in the slightest condition to receive certain sacred things. Not necessarily out of malice, but out of inability, lack of preparation, lack of value attributed to what is being offered. And what are the pearls and what is the holy? They are the things of greatest value in a person's spiritual and emotional life. They can be your faith, your worldview, your experience with God, your story of transformation, your innermost dreams, your deepest wounds. They are the things that you carry carefully, that have cost you dearly, that have shaped who you are. The question Jesus is asking is not, do you love these people? The question is this the right environment to offer this? Psychology calls this selective vulnerability. Researcher Brené Brown, who has dedicated decades to the study of shame and human courage, says that vulnerability doesn't mean opening your heart to anyone at any time. It means choosing wisely who you open up to, because the wrong exposure doesn't create connection, it generates wound. And that's exactly what Jesus was saying. It's not a lack of love, it's wisdom of love. There is a huge difference between being a loving person and being a person without discernment. You can deeply love someone and still recognize that that person is not in a position to receive what is most sacred to you. This is not judgment. It is a reading of reality. Think of a musician who plays a symphony at a noisy party where no one wants to hear it. Music does not lose its value. The musician is no less talented. But the wrong environment wastes what could be sublime. It's like that with your pearls. When you throw them into soil that wasn't prepared to receive them, They don't transform the ground. They disappear into it. Or worse, they're trampled on. And the verse ends with something that most people ignore. Turn yourselves in pieces. That's the most important detail of the whole teaching. It's not just that the pigs will ignore the pearls. It's that once you step on them, they turn against you. Those who don't know the value of what you offer don't become neutral. They become resentful, aggressive, or use what you've shared as a weapon. How many times have you experienced this? Did you open your heart, tell your story, show your faith, and the person used that to belittle you, ridicule you, or simply ignore you as if you were too naive? This was not your fault for loving. It was a lack of discernment about the right time and the right person. Jesus isn't asking you to close your heart. He's asking you to open your eyes. The people in your life who step on what is most precious to you. Now that you understand what Jesus meant, comes the part that really hurts, realizing that the people who step on your pearls are often not strangers. They are close people. They are family. They are friends for years. They are, in some cases, the partner with whom you share your life. And that's what makes this teaching so difficult to apply. Because it's easy to keep your distance from those you don't know. The hard part is recognizing the destructive pattern in the one you love. Psychology identifies some behavioral profiles that consistently trample on what is most valuable in the other, not necessarily with planned malice, but with a structural inability to value certain things. The first profile is that of the chronically cynical person. They have a ready answer to everything you present as meaningful. This is an illusion. You're naive. It won't work. They can't inhabit the space of dreams or faith because cynicism has become armor. When you share something precious with them, they don't attack with intent. They simply don't have the tools to receive them. The result is the same. You come out diminished. The second profile is that of the emotionally competitive person. When you tell an achievement, they tell a bigger one. When you talk about a pain, it turns into a competition of suffering. They can't be present in what you're experiencing because they're always busy with their own reflection. Their pearls aren't trampled on violently. They're simply ignored, swallowed up by their need for attention. The third profile is that of the person who uses what you share as ammunition. This is the most dangerous. She listens carefully. She seems present. And then, in a moment of conflict, she takes exactly what you revealed in the moment of vulnerability and uses it against you. You yourself told me that you are afraid of failure. You told me that your father never believed in you. She turns her intimacy into weakness. Recognizing these profiles is not making a moral judgment of these people. It is being clear about what they are capable of receiving and what they are not. And here comes a fundamental concept of relationship psychology: the difference between presence and emotional availability. A person can be physically present, may even like you, and still not be emotionally available to receive what is deepest in you. Presence does not guarantee the ability to welcome. How many times have you confused the two things, thinking that because the person was there, they were ready to listen, that because they loved you, they would understand? It's not always like that. And when you ignore this difference, the result is always the same. You open up and you leave with a wound that didn't exist before. Jesus' warning is gentle precisely because it is honest. He does not say that you should stop loving these people. He says that you should stop offering them what they cannot afford. You can continue in the relationship. You can continue to care, but you learn to distinguish what you share, with whom you share it, and at what time. That's emotional maturity, and it's also profound spiritual wisdom. Why do you keep giving your pearls to those who don't deserve it? If you already know that certain people don't value what you offer, why do you keep giving? That's the question most people avoid because the answer requires brutal honesty with yourself. Psychology has some very clear answers to this, and none of them are weakness. These are profoundly human patterns, often installed in childhood, that operate almost automatically. The first pattern is called the need for validation. When you grow up in an environment where you had to prove your worth to be loved, where love was conditional, where you had to work hard to deserve attention, you develop a reflex. You keep trying to prove your worth to those who don't see you. Not because you're naive, but because part of you still believes that, this time, you'll make it. That if you show more, share more, expose yourself more, the person will finally see how much you're worth. But that cycle never closes, because the problem isn't the amount of pearls you offer. It's that the person on the other end doesn't have the eyes to see them. The second pattern is the fear of conflict and rejection. Keeping your pearls, being selective about who you open up to, requires you to set boundaries. And boundaries for many people feel like aggression, they feel like coldness, they feel like ingratitude. So to avoid the discomfort of saying no, of closing a door, of disappointing someone, you keep opening up. You keep giving, even when you already know you're going to get hurt. The third pattern is perhaps the most subtle, the confusion between generosity and self-sabotage. Many people have been taught that giving without limits is a virtue, that if you measure what you give, you are selfish, that true love does not calculate. And then any attempt at discernment seems like a betrayal of your own values. But there is a huge difference between generosity and waste. Generosity is offering consciously, intentionally, in the right environment. Waste is throwing what you have most precious on land that you will not absorb, and leaving there emptier than you entered. Jesus wasn't preaching emotional avarice. He was preaching emotional intelligence, even before the term existed. And there's one more factor that modern psychology clearly highlights: the intermittent reinforcement cycle. When someone sometimes values what you offer and sometimes ignores it, your brain enters a game-like pattern. Unpredictability creates addiction. You keep trying because that time it worked was etched deeper than every time it failed. That's not character weakness, it's neurobiology. Understanding why you do this is the first step to stopping. Not out of resentment, not out of pride, but out of respect for what you carry. Your pearls have value regardless of who receives them, and protecting them is not pettiness. It is recognizing that the sacred deserves to be treated as sacred. The emotional price of talking. Too much to those who aren't ready to listen. There's a cost that very few people calculate before they open their mouths. A cost that doesn't show up right away. It shows up days, weeks, sometimes years later, in the form of shame, resentment, or a pervasive sense that you've lost your way. This cost has a name. It is the emotional price of the wrong exposure. When you say deep things to those who aren't ready to listen, there isn't just an awkward silence. Something much more complex happens inside you. Psychology calls it a post-vulnerability shame wound. That feeling of, why did I say that? I shouldn't have told you. Now I feel stupid. This wound is not caused by vulnerability per se. It is caused by vulnerability in the wrong environment. When you open up to someone who has the capacity to receive, the result is connection, lightness, empowerment. When you open up to someone who does not have this capacity, the result is the opposite. You feel more alone than before you spoke. And then a silent cycle of closure begins. You get hurt, you close yourself off a little, you try again, you get hurt again, you close yourself more. Over time, you start to have difficulty opening up even to those who really deserve it, because your emotional system has learned that openness is risk and has started to treat every openness as a threat. This explains why so many people reach middle age completely emotionally closed, incapable of real intimacy, with difficulty trusting anyone. It was not a choice. It was an adaptation to the wrong environment, repeated so many times that it became identity. In addition to the internal wound, there is the relational cost. When you share deep things with someone who doesn't know their value, you unintentionally change the dynamics of the relationship. The person starts to see you from an angle that you may not want to show. And you start to carry an uncomfortable awareness that you revealed more than you should, which generates distance, embarrassment, or a need to fix the image that the person has made of you. It also has the spiritual cost. When you talk about your faith, your experiences with God, your moments of inner transformation, with those who are in the mode of mockery or indifference, something resents you. It is not weakness. It is that the sacred, when exposed to ridicule, leaves a mark. You begin to be ashamed of what should be your greatest strength. Jesus knew that. That's why the warning isn't just strategic, it's protective. He's saying guard the sacred carefully, not because people are bad, but because not every environment is able to support the weight of what you carry. The practical wisdom here is simple, but it takes practice. Before you share something profound, ask yourself, has this person ever demonstrated the ability to receive it? Does they have a history of honoring what I share? Or am I pouring out of the emotion of the moment, the need to be understood now, without assessing whether this is the right soil? Pausing before the exhibition is not coldness. It is taking care of yourself. How to recognize. When keeping silence is the greatest act of wisdom. We live in a culture that glorifies expression. Say everything, share everything, be authentic at all times with everyone. Social networks have turned exposure into virtue and silence into suspicion. If you're not showing yourself, you're hiding something. If you're not opening up, you're afraid. But Jesus, and more serious psychology, say otherwise. Keeping silent can be the most powerful, mature, and loving gesture you make. Knowing when not to speak is a skill, and like any skill, it needs to be developed. Because it doesn't come naturally to those who grew up needing to justify themselves, explain themselves, or constantly prove their worth. The first sign that silence is the right answer is when you realize that the other person isn't asking genuine questions. They're asking questions to confirm what they already think, or to find gaps in what you say. When someone is genuinely curious about you, the questions make room. When they're not, the questions close, confront, or deflect. Learn to feel this difference before you keep talking. The second sign is when you feel an anxious urge to be understood right now. This is an emotional trigger, not a lucid assessment of the situation. When you're anxious to be understood, the risk of sharing with the wrong person at the wrong time is much greater. The urgency to be heard is legitimate, but it's not a good guide to who you should open up to. The third sign is when the conversation has a history of disrespecting what you shared before. If in a previous conversation you told something and the person minimized, ridiculed, or ignored it, silence in the next conversation is not punishment, it is learning. You are simply honoring the standard that the person has already shown. Keeping silent doesn't mean holding grudges. You can be at peace with someone and still choose not to open up to them about certain things. Peace and intimacy are different dimensions of a relationship. It's possible to cultivate one without demanding the other. The psychology of healthy relationships talks a lot about the calibration of intimacy, the ability to adjust the level of openness according to what the relationship sustains, without drama, without resentment, without the need for explanation. You simply don't offer what the environment doesn't hold. And there's a spiritual dimension here that's powerful. Silence is a form of reverence. When you keep a sacred experience to yourself, a moment of prayer, a word you've received, an inner transformation, you're treating it with the seriousness it deserves. Not everything needs to be verbalized to be real. Not every experience needs a witness to be valuable. Jesus spent 40 days in the desert. He didn't post anything. He didn't share it in real time. He left there transformed. And what happened in that silence was the basis of everything that came after. Silence is not absence. It is protection. It is cultivation. It is often the most generous gesture you can make with yourself and with the sacred you carry. Discernment, the gift that protects your peace without killing your love. We got to the point that all of this was building. Discernment, not as cold judgment, not as spiritual arrogance, but as one of the most practical, most human, and most necessary gifts there is. Discernment is the ability to see clearly, without being deceived by the emotion of the moment, social pressure, fear of disappointment, or desire to be loved. It is seeing things as they are, not as you would like them to be. And the reason so few people develop this gift is simple. Discernment hurts. Because sometimes it means acknowledging that the person you love isn't ready to receive what you have, that the environment you've chosen doesn't support who you're becoming, that you have to make tough choices about who you share what you carry with. But there is a very common confusion that needs to be dispelled. Discernment is not the opposite of love. It is, in fact, one of the most mature expressions of love. To love without discernment is not a virtue. It is emotional recklessness. It is to put your heart everywhere and then wonder why it is always empty. It is to offer what is most sacred to you without assessing whether the ground is ready. and then resenting it when it is stepped on. Discerning love says, I care about you, so I'm going to offer you what this relationship holds. I'm not going to fake an intimacy that doesn't exist. I'm not going to create expectations that either of us can sustain. I'm going to love you at the level that this relationship can sustain, and I'm going to save the rest for where it can flourish. Positive psychology talks about nurturing relationships versus draining relationships. Nurturing relationships are those in which you can be yourself, including your deepest, most fragile, most sacred parts of yourself, and come out of it more whole than you entered. Draining relationships are those in which you need to shrink, filter yourself, control yourself to survive the interaction. Discernment is the tool that helps you identify which is which and act on that reading. This does not mean abandoning everyone who is not at your level of emotional or spiritual maturity. It means adjusting what you offer to each relationship. With some, you share your vision, your dreams, your faith. With others, you keep the coexistence on a lighter plane without this meaning falsehood, only adequacy. And here's the freedom that this teaching of Jesus offers. You no longer have to feel guilty about not opening up to everyone. You no longer have to force yourself to be completely transparent in every context. You can love with presence, with care, with generosity, and still protect what's most sacred in you. Your pearls are real. They have value. They deserve the right soil. And you, who have come this far, who have had the courage to look at these standards, who are willing to grow, you deserve relationships that know how to receive what you have to offer. That was Jesus' warning, not of cruelty, of care. With you,